This is the story of a man named Stanley.
Okay. So we're doing this again.
Stanley worked for a company
Oh,
in a
there's
big
now
building
balloons.
where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi.
Hi.
Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
There's the balloons.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
There's the bucket.
Stanley picked up the bucket.
Stanley picked up the bucket. I wonder, I just gotta...
Stanley pressed the bucket upon every little thing in the office. Nothing responded to the bucket's touch, but it did little to discourage Stanley's belief in the magic of the bucket. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
Okay.
Still no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever. Perhaps his boss's office was where he'd find answers.
Ah!
Oh, Stanley, can you feel it?
Feel what?
The broom closet. It wants the bucket. You can feel that, can't you? The aura of jealousy. It's as clear as day. This broom closet believes it deserves the bucket. I can really feel it now. It's a bucket. It belongs in a broom closet. That's what the broom closet is trying to say here. It's supposed to go with the other cleaning supplies. Good for you, Stanley. Don't give in. Don't hand over the bucket. I know how hard it must be. Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's
Stanley
office.
and the bucket. Oh, that's locked this time. Interesting.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Crushed by the weight of this revelation, Stanley may have broken down into an emotional dumpster fire if not for the soothing presence of the bucket. Even now, in his darkest of hours, did the bucket's warmth and guiding light pierce the dark clouds of confusion and chaos. It would be with him always. The bucket would, and he knew it. The two of them were inseparable. At this point, Stanley was so absorbed in the tender spiritual connection he shared with the bucket that he didn't notice the keypad behind the boss's desk. Nor in his bliss of simply being near the bucket did he have any notion that the PIN number for the keypad was 2845. But Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes.
The bucket's guiding me.
This is certainly the most logical explanation. You found one of them. One of the miniature Stanley figurines. Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot that was a thing. But if they're gonna be that blatantly obvious, like there it is, then I feel like we haven't missed any. Because I feel confident saying that I don't think we've missed any.
The elevator raced downward, plummeting towards an unknown fate. It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together, if not for the bucket. Soothing him, comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here for you, Stanley. Everything will be fine. Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility. The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley and the bucket both wondered to themselves.
Is that the difference between, like, that's the whole thing is Stanley Parable 2 is just we have a bucket now? Is that the difference? Because if so, that is hilarious.
The monitors jumped to life, and Stanley nearly dropped the bucket in shock. Everyone in the office was being videotaped, monitored like guinea pigs.
No, there's a pirate.
The bucket had never seen anything
Was it
like
over there?
this, and it very nearly burst into tears as Stanley cradled it gently, reassuring it
that pirate.
that everything would be fine. Was the bucket under the mind control facility's influence as well? Had the bucket been told to do things it didn't wish to do? What kinds of things does a bucket want to do or not want to do in the first place? These questions raced furiously in Stanley's feeble mind. No! He screamed into the bucket. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control. Never! He squeezed the bucket tighter. His one friend in the entire world. At this point, he could trust no one except for the bucket. But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he and the bucket would dismantle the controls for good. Two best friends, Stanley and the bucket, up against the world.
Yes.
They high-fived in a really cool way, and the bucket made a sassy comment about taking down the system.
And the bucket made a sassy comment about taking down the system.
Stanley and the bucket waited in blackness. Was it over? Yes, they had done it. Stanley and the bucket had defeated their greatest and darkest enemy, freed themselves from the tyrannical grip of the evil mind control machine. Freedom was now mere moments away. Excitedly, the two of them began to discuss the kind of life they wanted to live once they stepped through this massive door. The bucket wanted to learn to roller skate. Stanley wanted to sneeze in every country on Earth. Both of them wanted to begin watching a movie, any movie, but then stop it halfway through and begin watching it in reverse from the end. True, it was a simple life they envisioned, but it was one they'd lived together, with one another to lean on, to trust, to support. What? Wait. What was happening? Why had the door stopped? Was Stanley and the bucket not about to be freed? Unbearable silence filled the room, lingering in uncertainty, until finally the truth hit Stanley square in the face. This building did not want the bucket to leave. Even the facility itself recognized the incredible calming presence of the bucket, needed the soothing warmth of the bucket, would go to any lengths not to part with the bucket. No, no, no. Stanley can't leave this place. Not while he has such a precious bucket in his arms. Not while this building has anything to say about it. Stanley realized he would never again leave this very room. But at least he has the bucket. To be trapped eternally in darkness isn't really so bad, Stanley thought to himself.
At least
as long as
he
I
has
have my
the
bucket with
bucket.
me, right? I'll be okay, won't I? Stanley gulped. Very soon now, he was about to find out.
Oh?
Already this was uncomfortable, and Stanley decided that as soon as he found a new space he felt safe in, that he would never leave it again in his life. Stanley lifted the bucket into his arms, and a wave of comfort rushed over him.
Yes.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly
So I have
to
an
his
idea.
chest and entered the door on his left.
Has idea. How many can you find? Bottom text. There will be a reward for finding them all. A large room locks box with stairs. Something to do with stairs. Somewhere both red and blue. A private but smelly place for an important person. Oh, well, I know where that one is then. The problem is, though, is with that one.
Coming to a
Oh, no,
staircase,
I can do that.
Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
I can find that one. And then we click here. And there it is.
Another miniature Stanley figurine. This, you know, there really must be a snappier name for these things. What about mini stands? Stanley figs? What about Stanlerines? Yes, I think I like that. Another Stanlerine under your
Another
belt.
Stanlerine. I got the feeling money's for stealing, but not yours, of course. Say that's a lovely purse. Dude, this being the sequel just makes it so much funnier. Or the quote-unquote sequel. Oh, I can actually open this time now. It didn't let me open this last time. Interesting. We're gonna go down. Going down, down with the sugar. We're going down streaming. And another bed in the button. Some of that div is having a bullet. Stanley Parable. Unreal. This is just. Like I didn't even do all of the first one. I did the first one fully through. And I've just been doing the new content, and since I started doing the new content, I'm now redoing the first content, but with a bucket this time. This is one of those things where I gotta repress it again. It just keeps going until I repress it. Alright.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned
Yeah,
to
we already
discover
know.
not an indication of any human life.
2,
Crushed by the
8,
weight of this revelation,
4, 5.
Stanley may have broken up, but Stanley guessed the correct code
Oh.
by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical
Alright, and that's
explanation.
right there was where one of the other ones were. So now we're going to go in here. Gonna click on this. We're then going to go. Alright, so now this is the new game plan. Is instead of going straight ahead to the mind control facility, instead of going this way, and going this way, and going this
Stanley
way,
and the bucket
instead of
walked
going
straight
this
ahead
way,
through the large door
we're
that
going
read,
this way.
Mind control.
This way was the
facility.
it was the
This passageway
escape.
had the word escape written on it.
This is the
The
escape.
truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death. The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track.
So far, this has been the exact same
Stanley
game
and the bucket were knowingly
as
walking
Stanley
forward
Parable.
into a very painful death for each of them.
They just added the word "and bucket" to everything. The end is never, 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 the end is never. And boom. This is where it ends. This is where it all goes down.
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket, but what use is a sense of ease when you're about to be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere.
That's fair.
Farewell, Stanley.
Let's see if we get stopped. Yep.
"Farewell, Stanley," cried the narrator,
Oh
as
my
Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral
What is
the
happening?
bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death.
Yeah.
It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
Wait, where'd my bucket go? The bucket welcomes you to the grand exhibit. You are standing in the precipice of knowledge. Much like the bucket itself, the human mind is frequently empty within a cavernous void. But through the use of the exhibit in front of you, your mind becomes full and enriched.
Can you see how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life?
What is happening? $25 buckets. That looks like a lot more than 25 buckets. That looks like a lot more than 25 buckets. Inferno bucket. Oh wait, no, there's something on this wall. What's on this wall? Distress bucket. Presented without commentary. So worrying, negative forecasting, negative thought, thinking, lack of reassurance goes into the bucket. And then you pour it out, and coping strategies equals holes. Relax and rest. Doing something you enjoy, rest and relax. Alright. What do... Cave drawing.
No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
The hanging bucket. My bucket. I took the bucket.
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
Okay. Let me guess, turn my Xbox off?
Let Stanley die.
Whoa.
Let him be crushed by the machine. Don't reset the game.
Whoa.
Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take its place as ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world, a new vision for...
I don't understand what's happening now. I feel like my brain is just rotting the more and more I'm playing.